Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to Cinephilia, and we're back. How you doing?
I'm good. It's a special episode. I guess because first of all, we're doing Black History Month movies. So I've been outlining all of these. I kind of remember we have different cameras this time.
Yeah, you can keep talking to that one.
I've been outlining all of these black movies that I love throughout the month on social media, and so today we're just going to go through a bunch of those, and then also mention like some other ones that I was thinking of but didn't have time to post, because there's so many good black movies that I feel like should be seen. So that's one reason why it's special. Another reason why it's special is that we didn't say it last week, but last week was our 150th episode of this show.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot of shows. So we're celebrating that, even though that was last week. We're celebrating that this week.
Yeah.
And also, I guess we should say this is the last episode before a little hiatus.
Yeah, we're gonna be taking kind of like a break in the retooling of the show. We keep saying we're gonna keep changing things up, but we haven't been able to because we keep talking about the next show. So we're gonna take a little break, and then we're gonna kind of rearrange things and see what we're gonna do with the show. We're not gonna stop. We just want to do something different because we've done 150 episodes of this.
Right.
So hope we're gonna come back with better stuff.
Yeah, it'll be new and improved and updated, and lots of cool things are happening. More cameras.
And that camera. And that camera.
I have to make sure my hair looks good from every angle now. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun show, I think.
I think so. So yeah, I'm trying to get rid of the weird thing.
So, I hope everyone has been having a good Black History Month. I hope everyone has been finding some sort of joy in their days, because the world is a bit much right now. We're not going to go into all of that. We're going to bring you fun stuff.
We're all just kind of getting used to it, falling apart every couple of months.
Every couple months. It doesn't even take that long
to
get to the next fall apart. Like, it's just... But anyway, welcome. I guess we should start with some... Do you have any news?
I have some news. Hold it up. So apparently, Indy 5 has wrapped filming as of now. So they're getting ready to, start working on post-production on.
I can't remember if is Shia LaBeouf?
No, I don't think he's
back?
No,
okay.
I think they very much said, yeah, never mind it.
Yeah.
So it's a whole new thing.
I'm curious how that.
James Mangold is directing. He directed Logan, 3:10 to Yuma. So he's directed some really good movies. So this might be cool. So yeah, they started last year, and it's been on and off because of COVID. They have to, stop production, but they're done. They're ready to go.
Is this what Harrison Ford was working on when he got injured? I can't remember.
I don't know.
He got injured on set sometime last year, and they had to stop production.
Oh yeah, I have no idea. Maybe. Did you have any news?
I don't.
Okay.
I checked out this week. I don't have any news.
Spielberg is also planning a Bullet movie. You guys remember the movie Bullet?
Oh yeah, I do.
Steve McQueen from the 1960s. Spielberg's not they said it's not necessarily a remake, but just kind of like another movie. I didn't really care. I just thought it was interesting that I like to see what Spielberg's going to work on next.
Right.
So I feel that again feels more like kind of stuff he should be working on, grounded things that are more like, even if it's a little, because the movie has a little like action scenes, and it's like.
I've never seen the original Bullet, so I have nothing to go by.
I know of it, and I know that there's a big car chase scene, and apparently Steve McQueen did the driving. He did some stunt driving, so. I feel like that might be a decent choice for Spielberg.
Yeah.
And again, we enjoyed West Side Story a lot.
Yeah, and it's funny that West Side Story came out at the end of 2021, and a lot of people weren't really talking about it when it was out. But now I've noticed that a lot of people are talking about it right now. Like, there's been some talk on Twitter and some retweets of a specific camera shot, like a long take.
Oh yeah.
The one leading into the ballroom or the party that they went to. It's a really great take, and there's a lot of great cinematography, but also that cinematography leads to a lot of great storytelling, visual storytelling that's happening without any dialogue. But you get to know a lot of the characters in that scene and their interactions with each other. I don't know why. Right now, West Side Story is like on a lot of people's lips. Everyone's talking about it.
And I think it finally started getting around to digital, doesn't it?
Oh, maybe that's why.
I think so. Because I know screeners and stuff gone out for like voting and stuff like that. So I think it might be available for digital. So a lot of people who weren't going to the movie theaters might finally watch it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The last little bit of news is kind of not funny, but like kind of funny. Apparently, some thieves stole a bunch of props from the Crown set, like $200,000 worth of props, like Fabergé egg, like really important stuff to the series. So now they're trying to find the people who stole. Apparently, they broke into some cars, and I don't know what the things were doing in the cars.
Yeah.
Or maybe when the article said cars, it maybe meant like vehicles that were holding or transporting the props. But
have you watched The Crown?
I saw the first couple seasons, and I again keep meaning to go back for it. But I really liked it.
Yeah, that's a show I've heard a lot about. A lot of people talk about how much they like it, but I haven't watched it yet. I need to watch it.
It's one of those like you have to sit and watch. You can't be on your phone. You can't put it in the background. No, you have to sit and watch because.
But that's a good thing because when we're taking in media, we should be we should be paying attention.
We should be.
I definitely have shows that I put on as background stuff that I don't pay attention to. But if it's something good, then you should give it your attention.
Cool. Well, that's it for news. I didn't feel like there was nothing interesting. I feel like there's not a lot of interesting happenings. We say that every week now, but I feel like it's been week to week. It's been like one or two news things, and then everything else is kind of like.
Yeah, I think that is an outcome of the pandemic because so many things have gotten pushed back or delayed, and they're starting to get back into it now. But the news outlet is kind of like. Also, there's bigger news happening right now.
No.
So.
Oh, one of the other news. Yes, bigger news. The other things that actually was kind of a big deal this week is the backlash that the Oscars have been getting when people.
Oh yes. I forgot about
people have been real. They announced they were gonna not air a few certain categories. One of which was film editing, which is one of the major things in film. I think it was film editing, original score.
Hair and makeup,
a bunch of things. You're like, why wouldn't you air those?
Right.
It's weird. It's the award shows have been declining in audience over the last 10, 20 years.
Right.
And they keep doing things that just makes it worse and worse.
I'm one of those people who used to be like have to watch Oscars. Used to throw Oscar parties actually. I used to throw Oscar parties, and when I stopped throwing them, our friend Ryan started throwing them instead. And I used to be so into the Oscars and so into all the award season, and now I don't really
know.
I already know going into it that I'm going to be let down, so I just don't even bother anymore.
And then they did this thing. They're like, viewer's choice or whatever, fan choice. Which is supposed to try to get like maybe younger people or like people who are like internet, but then they don't stream. Well, instead of doing that, concentrate on giving it access to people who don't normally, because you have to watch it on cable, you have to watch it on regular TV. Why isn't it streamed on YouTube or something where everybody can watch it for like the people who don't watch regular TV, who are the younger audience that you're trying to get a hold of? You're not really doing anything.
Yeah. It's a mess.
It is a mess.
It's the Oscars.
And my favorite thing about the Oscars was always watching the best song presentations because there was always really cool productions. Those have kind of like gone out. Now they just go up on stage, they sing the song, and they walk out. They used to be really cool productions for those.
You know what my favorite thing used to be? Oh, we could have a whole episode about how great the Oscars used to be. I used to love it when animated characters would come out and present awards.
Yes.
I just thought that was so cool as a kid, like seeing Snow White or Buzz and Woody or whoever come out, and they have a whole little animated segment. It's like they're actually a part of the industry.
But now they're not.
No.
Well, we do have some trailers though. I have trailers. Oh wait, don't start yet. Don't start. This trailer for a movie called The Humans. It's with oh my god, I just forgot his name, and I was just gonna tell you how much I love this actor.
You can love him even if he doesn't have a name.
You'll find out.
What else was he in?
He's been in so many things. He was in. He was like one of the Farrelly brothers used to make movies. He was always in their movies. Richard Jenkins.
Oh, okay.
I love him.
Yeah.
So this is a movie called The Humans.
Zombie show on TV. It's awful. I can't believe people want to watch that kind of stuff at night. No, there's enough going on in the real world to give me the creeps.
Great. Thank you.
To the Blake family Thanksgiving.
To the very special Chinatown edition of the Blake family Thanksgiving.
Here.
Dad, you won't get any reception up here. You have to lean up against the window. Yeah, but no. Lean in. Smush your body up. There you go.
So, are you balancing a job with all your studies?
The main reason I'm not done with school yet is because I was depressed for a bit. I'm fine now.
In our family, we don't have that kind of depression.
Dad. Whoa, come back to earth.
Sorry.
No, we just have a lot of stoic sadness.
Can't you hire someone to...
Costs $100 a night to hire someone to make sure she doesn't fall
Hey,
and get
okay.
hurt. No, she needs to think before she opens her mouth.
Don't you think it should cost less to be alive? Absolutely.
There's this comic
already
book
love this
I was
movie.
obsessed with as a kid. It's about this species of half alien, half demon creatures. And the scary stories that they tell each other are all about us, humans.
I know you think there's something wrong with me. It's not a news flash.
Please don't act like a murderer when I'm trying to apologize.
You'll find someone new. You're gonna come out of this stronger. I promise.
Stop lying to me. Just stop. Don't actually stop.
Anything I say makes her.
Yeah. Who she remind you of?
You.
Me.
You.
She's
It's you, my friend.
I love that in times like this, I have a home base, a family I can always come home to.
To knowing that this is what matters, right here. Because everything anyone's got, no matter who you are, everything you have goes.
Well, that's a positive way of looking at things.
Wow. Do that at a funeral, Dad.
The cast. This is such a good cast.
Coming soon. That's great, doesn't it?
I got emotional watching that trailer. I'm going to be bawling my eyes out watching that movie. I can already feel it. Which is a plus for me. I love movies that make me do that. So, yeah.
Cool. And the other movie is for a horror-ish movie
Ooh.
called Barbarians.
Just think, after tonight, this
I
is
say
hard.
horror-ish because I don't really know that.
Hello. I can't believe he's here.
Benjamin Button, honestly, taken to country life is the perfect place to raise a family.
Being here has drawn my work towards something. I certainly can't explain it.
Oh.
Love country life. Love it. Cheers to unplanned parenthood.
Lucas,
You're pregnant.
you are?
I need a cigarette.
I really do feel like I belong here.
All right, easy, mate. It's not your house yet, is it? You're a big boy now, aren't you? Hit me. Why? I guess the best form of defense is me.
Adam, what's wrong with you?
I may have misread what this movie is.
What's this?
Yeah, I'm not getting horror vibes, but this looks funny. Here comes the horror.
There you go.
This is part of the American psyche. The love of guns and violence.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Is the only realistic form of self-defense. While we're celebrating.
It's a complete whirlwind. This is me and you against the world. And if anyone gets in our way, I'll just shoot them to death.
I would actually love to go for a hunt one day.
I'll just get dessert then, shall I?
So it looks interesting.
I'm
too.
for it. And you know what's really funny?
What's that?
Is that I kind of want to watch both of those movies as a double feature. They kind of fit.
Cool. So today we're going to talk about 30
30 plus.
plus
great black films. Only movies. I didn't get into television, but I've been, since the beginning of the month, since it's Black History Month, I've been posting every day about my favorite black movies. And I was finding that it's hard to narrow it down to just one month, a movie a day. So in addition to the 30 black movies that I had already picked for the month, despite the fact that February only has 28 days this month, this year, I picked 30, but then I also have like other movies I'm gonna sprinkle here and there that I think are worth watching. So, I'm curious how many movies of these you've seen. I know you've seen a bunch of them.
I'm sure. Yeah, I looked at these. I've seen a few of them. Yeah, I'm gonna say not seen most of them, but I've seen a bunch of them.
Well, these
I
are
feel good
movies
about
that,
this list more than generally I feel about lists.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I will say my prerequisite for this was I wanted to have movies that. First of all, it's a very personal list. These are movies that I enjoy. This is by no means, what you should take as the best black films ever. This is just what I like. Everyone likes different things. But my prerequisite for this was that they were movies that I love, but also movies that celebrate blackness. Because there are tons of movies with black leads that aren't really about blackness, or movies that are black movies but kind of focus on the trauma of blackness. And there's definitely, to be black in America and to be black in the world, there's definitely trauma to be had within it. So there are definitely some movies on this list that incorporate that, but the movies themselves are more of a celebration of blackness, even with that trauma. So that was my prerequisite for this. The first movie I posted about was The Last Black Man in San Francisco. I'm just going to warn you, for anyone who has watched this show a lot, you've heard of a lot of these movies already, because these are movies I always rave about. Last Black Man in San Francisco being one of them. This is like just one of my favorite, more recent black films. It's just so good. I will, you know what's going to make this easier? Because I have a whole Twitter thread and Instagram post with these, and I'm just going to, as a way to start the conversation about these movies, because there's a lot to get through. We're not going to focus on all of them for too long, but just as a way to start the conversation about these movies, I'm going to read what I wrote about each one. As soon as I pull up my list. Here we go. So Last Black Man in San Francisco, what I wrote about this one was, it's an incredible analysis of personal history, community, gentrification, what connects us, what makes us, and what we hold on to for dear life, and why, what we hold on to for dear life and why, shaped by stellar performances and enchanted cinematography. So, yeah, all of that.
Nice.
I just love what these characters are going through, as far as the lead character wants to hold on to this house that he believes is his because his great-great-grandfather, someone in his lineage supposedly built it. And so he's holding on to it even though gentrification is happening. Everyone who can't afford to live in San Francisco has to move out, and he's just refusing to play a part in that. And it's all shot sort of like a fairy tale. It's got really lush, like high saturated color. It's just a beautiful movie, and kind of melancholy in a bit too.
Is this one streaming anywhere?
It is on Amazon Prime, I believe. I do have my trusty letterbox open, and it can tell me right away that it's not on Amazon Prime anymore. It was for a while. It's on Canopy at the moment.
Canopy, okay.
So you can stream that on Canopy.
Or you likely, any of these that are not on a service, you can probably rent them if you really want to watch them.
Yeah.
For like $2 or $3.
These are actually movies that, if it's not streaming, feel free to support. We want to support black films. And also, like I started doing this because it's Black History Month, but these movies are worth watching any time of the year. And there's far more than just these movies that I'm mentioning. And, you know, just, I could do a whole, like, 365 list of
Okay, because I was really worried that I was going to have to try to fit these in like a day and a quarter that's left. And I don't think I was going to be able to watch 30 movies in, like, a day and a little bit.
I mean, how fun would that be to try, though?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, definitely, like, it's the end of Black History Month, so spread these out throughout the year and just watch them. Watch them anytime. You don't have to wait for Black History Month to celebrate Blackness.
Black people exist year-round.
Yeah, exactly. So one that I did not post about, but I'll consider posting about, is another of my like favorite, more recent Black movies is Blind Spotting. This I didn't.
I was like, where is it?
That's what I'm saying. Ones that I don't post about. I only have posters available for the ones I did post about. But Blind Spotting came out a few years ago. The director of that is now working on the quote live action remake of Robin Hood that's going to be on Disney Plus.
Oh,
that's random.
You know, if any of them, I was kind of excited about seeing what could be done with that. That's a good one that I think. It's animals and it's Robin Hood. That might be interesting.
No, but what year is it? Blind Spotting came out in 2018. And I believe that there is a show version of Blind Spotting now, but I'm not sure, like a TV series. But it stars Daveed Diggs and has to do with also about gentrification and moving out of Oakland and the kind of experiences that are happening there for Black people. So that's another plus.
Yeah, and it's currently available on Amazon Video, iTunes, Tubi, Pluto, and YouTube. I think this is a rental at this point.
Oh, worth it. So worth it. This is one that I actually got from, I believe I got it from Netflix DVD the first time I saw it.
Nope.
And no, I'm still talking about Blind Spotting. I got it from Netflix DVD the first time I saw it, and I watched it 3 times in a row before I sent it back. I watched it like just as a film for the first time, and then I watched it with director commentary, and then I watched it with actor commentary, and I was just like 3 times in a row, and I still could watch it more. It was that good of a movie.
Okay.
So, okay, now like classic Black cinema, you gotta go with Spike Lee. I have such a roller coaster history with Spike Lee because I came into film at a time, you know, when I was younger, came into film at a time when I was looking for something other than Blackness. Like I was really into like weird stuff like, or I would say weird light stuff like Tim Burton. It was not really weird, but it's like, when you're looking for weirdness, that's your entry point. And so when I was young, getting into film, I was like, I want to do stuff like Tim Burton. And because I'm Black, and everyone that I knew was Black was like, oh, you're going to be the next Spike Lee. Clearly, I can't hold a candle to Spike Lee. So I have a weird history with him, but I loved Spike Lee movies as a kid, and then I kind of got out of them. And now I've gotten back into them because as an adult, looking back at them, realizing how important they are and what they show. Do the Right Thing, I think, is one of the masterpieces of cinema. Like the way that it brings in tension into the story, as far as race relations and who's where in this situation. It's just such a masterclass of filmmaking.
And for a large chunk of us growing up, Spike Lee was like the Black director.
Right, exactly.
And he was like one of the few ones who was actually doing stuff, and maybe not necessarily just doing stuff, but as actually was known and actually part of the industry, like and so
he was the guy. He was the Black director who had made it. There were definitely other Black directors in history, but he was the one who kind of made that crossover that people even outside of the Black community were noticing. And so as someone from the Black community, it's always like, well, that's what I want. I want, to be noticed by everyone. So that's why he's the one that a lot of Black people attach to. And as a kid, I was very annoyed by, oh, you're going to be the next you're going to be the next Spike Lee. As an adult, I'm like, yes, that's actually the right thing to say at the time, because this was before, you know, we'll get into more black directors that came later, but Spike Lee was really
and because he was the only one, he lived this role where like he was praised and then hated by some other groups. And he was kind of going back and forth with, because he was the only one that he took all of that. Yeah. There are a lot of Spike Lee movies. So I only have 2 Spike Lee movies on this list, but I will say like so many of his movies just touch on the Black experience, and they're very authentic. I think that's why he stood out during that time, is because he was actually giving authentic representation so Black people could see themselves on screen as opposed to being this like character that someone else is writing about. But like Do the Right Thing, Crooklyn is an amazing movie, Jungle Fever is an amazing movie about interracial relationships. Bamboozled is an amazing movie. I almost put Bamboozled on my list for the month, but I think that is a very heavy watch because it deals with specifically blackface and the way that Black people have been portrayed in movies. And as this is a list that I wanted to like celebrate Blackness, I think that Bamboozled is an important movie to watch. Everyone should see, but I didn't put it on my list for this one because it's heavy. It's awkward to watch. But my all-time favorite Spike Lee movie is actually School Days, which is the movie that came out. You don't want to hide me behind the... No, I don't hide you behind the... There we go.
Behind the poster.
School Days.
School Days that actually... It came out a year before Do the Right Thing. I think Do the Right Thing was the movie that really solidified Spike Lee. It really hit like across all audiences, and that's when his name started to get big. This movie came out just before that, and it's all about the Black experience at a historically Black university. And it's just so, it's one of my, I love movies that are both, this is such a juxtaposition. I love movies that are both grounded in reality, but heightened reality. Those two things don't go well together unless they're like done expertly. And I think that this is a movie that does that because it takes everything that is actually authentic about that situation, that place, and takes it into like a caricature level that's really fun to watch. So all of these characters are like so extreme, but also so authentic at the same time. But this is a movie that I don't know if a lot of people have seen this, but this kind of inspired a whole bunch of other stuff, including like Dear White People, which is a movie and a show series that do a lot of the same thing, where it takes caricatures of Black personalities and Black spaces. Higher Learning is a movie that also was kind of inspired by this because it deals with all of the socio-political stuff happening in a school atmosphere. But this is the one. Then I also have to mention like Malcolm X and The Five Bloods are Spike Lee movies that I think are worth watching too. So yeah, I'm
School Days is the one that I'm not very familiar. I know.
I don't think a lot of people.
It's classic. I remember seeing it when I was younger. But until you said that, I didn't realize this movie existed.
Also, what I think is interesting about Spike Lee movies, and it might be a deterrent for non-Black people, because a lot of, when we go into a movie, we're looking for like specific plots or a specific, story structure. But Spike Lee has a few movies that don't really follow a story structure that way. It kind of are, these movies like Crooklyn or School Days are kind of more of snippets of life that happens, and it's not necessarily like there's conflict, but there's not necessarily a plot that has a definite end. Like the ending of School Days is amazing. It's one of my favorite endings of any film ever, but it isn't a perfect wrap up like you would expect from a movie. It's kind of, you know, it kind of shows that that's how it is with Black life. Like, there are some things that you go through, and it's kind of like, this is how it is, and you have to figure out what's next. Like, knowing all of this stuff that you just saw in this movie, what's the next decision you're going to make? And that's kind of where it leaves you. And I like that about it. I Am Not Your Negro is a Black documentary about James Baldwin. It's actually about the civil rights movement, but told from the point of view of James Baldwin, and about what it means to be a Black American, as opposed to being an American, where you have this stigma attached to you instead of just being accepted as fully American. But the fact that it comes from James Baldwin's own words, like the whole movie is just Samuel L. Jackson narrating, reading excerpts from James Baldwin's writings, and it really solidifies like what was happening during the 1960s, during the civil rights movement. He's like focused on people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and what they're doing for Black people during the times. But James Baldwin kind of is playing a different role than those two. He's kind of playing a witness to it and being the author that writes everything down that is happening. And so it gives like a different perspective of that experience.
Yeah, and if you don't know who he is, you've likely have seen snippets of interviews that he's done, because he did a lot of interviews where he talked about stuff. I've seen him all over TikTok, and anytime like race stuff comes up, his stuff comes up a lot, because he's very eloquent and precise about the things he says, how he explains things.
He's also, in addition to being Black, he was queer. And that doesn't play into the documentary as much as I personally would have loved. But another documentary that I want to recommend in addition to this is called Brother Outsider, which is about Bayard Rustin, who was kind of like Martin Luther King's right-hand man. He's the guy who kind of got all of the marches formed during that time. And he was openly queer. His documentary goes into it a lot, but he was openly queer to the point that he was considered a pervert by many. Just for the fact that he was, like not shying away from hiding those kind of acts. But the fact that he was there, a part of the scene, a part of the movement, makes it all the better. And I'm kind of like, I personally want to see more queer Black perverts. Like that's a part of the movement that always gets left behind, and you can't leave, if you're fighting for Black liberation, you can't leave any Black person behind. Like you have to include all of that. So I think that I Am Not Your Negro and Brother Outsider would make like a good documentary double feature. And if I'm talking about queer Black documentaries, then I have to go into Black Is, Black Ain't, which is a documentary by Marlon Riggs, who was a queer Black documentarian. This movie goes into, I'm going to go back and forth between this one and the next one, which is Tongues Untied. They're both by Marlon Riggs. This one is the more popular one because it just deals with being a queer Black man and what that is. And the title Tongues Untied is, when we've reached the point of being able to be queer and Black and not have to be silent about it. Your tongue is untied, so now you can be loud and unapologetic about it. And this was a very important documentary for me growing up because it was the first time that I really got to see people like this in film, like being loud and apologetic. It kind of gives the history of like snapping, where snaps come from in the queer Black community. It gives a lot of history and a lot of like insight into what it is to be queer and Black. That's the Marlon Riggs documentary that's more known. Black Is, Black Ain't isn't as known, but I think is just as important because it also speaks about what it means to be Black in general, but also what it means to be a marginalized Black person, i.e. a queer Black person or a Black woman, or, you know, any type of like Black other. And so you know, the title is in reference to, you know, what do we consider Black? What do we consider not Black? Or what do some consider not Black? What's not good enough? And I think what's important about Black is Black Ain't is that he's interviewing like Black scholars about this stuff. So we got Bell Hooks, we have Angela Davis, we have Cornel West, and these are like all important Black voices that he's getting opinions from, and they're, you know, there's just some great stuff being said. But what's also important about this documentary is that at the same time that he's interviewing these people and making this documentary, Marlon Riggs himself is dying of AIDS. And so all of these voices talking about how important it is to be Black and how important it is to be recognized as a Black other even, all of those shots have been juxtaposed with shots of Marlon Riggs as he's dying of AIDS, because a lot of, you know, queer people, Black people, minorities, when they're put into such a situation, are then just forgotten. And so it's a really heart-tugging documentary, but it's so good and so important and so touching that I feel like everyone should see it. So yeah, as I was saying earlier, like, I love things that are both grounded in reality and heightened reality at the same time, and that's really hard to do. But I feel like my intersection of being Black and being queer is what enjoys that. Like, being Black feels very rooted to me and very like grounded in reality. I think being Black or being like a person of color in general, you notice things a lot more real than a lot of non-people of color. So that's, I think, where that comes from. And then my being queer is just fucking fun and campy and like over the topness, right? So a perfect movie that I think is like the combination of that being grounded and being heightened reality at the same time is The Wiz. Because it's so, there's no question that this movie is like one of the most outstanding, like over the top Black films. Like, you don't really see Black fantasy done this way a lot. And so I love it for that, but at the same time, everything that it's doing is so authentic and showing Black culture and showing like the history of Black people in a way that isn't like awful. Like, you take something that like the trope of like Black people being like pimps and hoes, like that's an awful stereotype. But then when you like take that and reinterpret it to be like the poppy fields from The Wizard of Oz are actually like these prostitutes dressed like poppies that are like luring you in so that they can put you to sleep. It's kind of like, yes, I love what you're doing here. I love that kind of thing. And there's also like a whole history of reinterpreting, as we were talking about last week on the show, reinterpreting white cinema into another culture. And The Wiz is very much that. Like take that story that could be generally for anyone, but actually put lots of a culture into it, so that it is just for those people. Not saying non-Black people, like anyone can enjoy The Wiz, but if you're Black, you're getting a little bit more out of it than anyone else.
I do remember seeing it when I was younger and going, I like this movie, this is real cool, but I feel like I'm missing a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm invited to come watch this, but I'm just not for me. I'm not for me to understand everything, but it was really cool. The cool thing is that, again, it was a big production, a big motion picture, again, in a time where that kind of like targeted something that studios didn't really take a chance on, and maybe because it was Michael Jackson, and because there's more
Diana Ross,
Quincy
Jones producing it,
that it helped to kind of put it out there and be a big thing. And it's a great movie.
Yeah, it's amazing. I absolutely love it. And there's when I posted about this, I got someone, not black, commenting saying that they saw this movie when they were a kid, and it scared the shit out of them, and they've never been able to watch it again. And they were confused because they were thinking like something like this because it is a family movie. It's the fucking Wizard of Oz, you know. They were confused that this was. They were confused at the idea that this was scary to them, and maybe they should revisit it, and it wouldn't be scary. And I was like, well, what makes you think that it wasn't supposed to be scary? Because I think that scariness is something that's important in children's media, children's literature. Like, that's why fairy tales are fucking scary, because you're scaring morals into kids. That's basically what is happening. But I think that a lot of people look at something that's supposed to be like black cinema should be a little more precious. Like I feel like it's almost like like this can't be like if a non-black person is looking at it and thinks that it's scary, then I think they have some sort of reaction like, am I being racist for thinking this is scary?
Yeah.
You know? Where that's not the case. Like, there are things in this movie that actually are scary, and, you know, black kids can get scared by stuff just as easily as anyone else. For example, the subway scene in this movie, like I was saying, how you take negative things from the culture and make it more interesting. Like, that subway scene is clearly inspired by like being in the world and seeing things that you maybe shouldn't see, like maybe a drug user or like some weird guy like approaching you on the subway. That scene is supposed to be scary because this guy approaches them and then has these monsters that start to like chase after them. And it's, you know, it's just a way of interpreting like how the world is, but for, you know, kids.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should be too precious about it. I love when things like that happen. So yeah, like,
which is like in the other Wizard of Oz movie, like they kind of made an effort to pull back on scary things. They try to make it like a wonderful family movie. But that's not to say that scary stuff will undo family things. I mean, there's other movies that I watched as a kid. I was like, that scared the shit out of me, but it was a good family movie.
But even like the original Wizard of Oz, I feel like has definite scary moments. Like when the flying monkeys come to catch them in the woods.
That's right, man.
That's a fucking scary moment. Even when the Wicked Witch is melting. As a kid, you're like, what the fuck just happened? Dorothy just melted the Wicked Witch. And so like the Wiz is not gonna be more precious than the original. Like the Eveline in the Wiz is such a fucking awesome character, but she's scary and she's oppressive. She's fucking ruling a sweatshop where these people are forced to work. But then that makes, like, when you get to the Brand New Day scene, that makes that even more, you know, powerful because these people are breaking out of their oppression. Again, taking a negative thing from the life and putting a spin on it. The Wiz is just such a good movie. Also, people may think of me a certain way for saying this, but I think that the flying monkeys in The Wiz are fucking hot. I'm just gonna leave that. So, yeah, The Wiz. Another movie that I don't have a poster for, but is another one of those movies that takes like black culture and just infuses it to like some weird heightened reality thing, is The Last Dragon. Which not only takes black culture, but also takes Asian culture, Chinese culture, because it's all about this guy who is a huge fan of Bruce Lee and of Kung Fu movies. And it's just like the combination is like this black Asian fusion that is is wild. Definitely worth checking out. It's a lot of fun.
1985, and it looks like a very 85 movie.
I was just about to say, it's very dated. It is very much an 80s movie. If you love 80s movies, then you probably have seen this already because it is the epitome of an 80s movie. Also, not not perfect in when looking at things from today's point of view. There's some kind of cringy moments in it, so go in knowing that. But again, I'm always like, remember your history, you know, see things that were awful at the time so you know what not to do now. But overall, I think it's a very fun, wild movie that's worth checking out. Have you ever seen The People Under the Stairs?
Have I ever seen People Under the Stairs? I was obsessed in this movie when I was a kid.
This is another one that I feel like is like both grounded but has a very weird, heightened reality type thing.
When did this movie come out?
This movie came out in 91.
91, yep. I was 10 years old, and I watched this movie over. I don't even know if I owned it or how I watched it over. I remember watching this movie over and over and over. I love this movie.
It's so good. Directed by Wes Craven. Like this, I would not guess this type of movie from Wes Craven, but what I love about it is, first of all, it's got a black kid protagonist, which a lot of horror movies don't have, like a kid protagonist for one, but then a black kid. So I, as a kid, watching this, because I was also 10 years old when this came out, watching this as a kid, I was right there with the antagonist, with the protagonist.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking everything he was thinking because we were like the same kid. So that's one thing that I love about it. The second thing that I love about it is that it is a whole social commentary on race and class, because you get this this black kid that gets trapped inside this large house owned by white people, and that house suddenly takes on the form of like this socio-economic space where the black kid is unable to comprehend everything that's happening because of the whiteness that's happening. And I mean, for lack of a better word, there's a lot of like, there's a lot of things that aren't a part of the black community happening in this household, and him witnessing it for the first time is just kind of like, whoa, it's like a culture shock. But also because he comes from a poor background and he's there trying to better himself and better his community, and the people who own the household are like oppressors and trying to catch him and kill him.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of like textual stuff going on there that you can read into.
I think maybe that's why I connected this movie, because at 10 years old, I had only been in the US for 2 years.
Yeah.
So like that was also me discovering things about this new world around me, and connecting with another kid who was a kid, you know, of color, who was discovering these things about this whole new people that I had never met before. So I was
discovering things and then going, what the fuck is that?
What was that?
What are we doing here? So yeah, I think this was like, this is the first horror movie on my list, and obviously we're going to get into some horror movies, but this, I think as a kid, was the first time I connected with someone in a horror movie like that. And maybe this was part of my gateway to horror. I haven't included it on my gateway to horror list, but I think it's definitely worth talking about. I love that movie. So if we're getting into horror now, then I have to go to my go-to, which is Night of the Living Dead. I've talked about this movie so much on the show already. I've talked about it elsewhere a lot. I actually just recently, I'm not going to name it yet, but I just recently recorded as a guest on a podcast talking about this movie. So that should be coming out soon. So I'm not going to go into too much depth because I've done it already, but Night of the Living Dead is just so important. It's so good, but it's so important, like for what it stands for having this black lead character during the civil rights movement when we weren't getting a lot of black leads in movies at this caliber. Yeah, and the tragedy that ensues. I'm not going to go into more detail, but yeah, Night of the Living Dead is important. I feel like up until this point, because this is blaxploitation, but this is also not this is after like we've gotten a lot of movies starring Sidney Poitier. I think up until this point, Sidney Poitier was like the black lead for Hollywood. And this, I think, changed the script a little bit just because it's so... Sidney Poitier is always presented as this well upstanding guy in well upstanding movies. And here we got, you know, Dwayne Jones is playing a well upstanding guy, but he's in a horror movie, and I don't think anyone was expecting this from a horror movie. So it's kind of groundbreaking. If you like Dwayne Jones and Night of the Living Dead, I think most of you have probably seen Night of the Living Dead already, then I suggest watching Ganja and Hess, which is one of the few other movies that Dwayne Jones did. He was actually more of a theater actor, but between Night of the Living Dead and this, you get a full like glimpse of who Dwayne Jones was, and he's such a good actor. He's also so hot in this movie. But this movie is a vampire movie, and it's about these black people, Ganja and Hess, who meet and are becoming vampires, and kind of what that means, and also the history of vampires from a black perspective. Like, what if it came from Africa? There's a lot going on here. This is also a very artsy, experimental film, so this kind of was breaking the mold for vampire movies and for blaxploitation movies, which this was kind of around the beginning of blaxploitation movies. Very, very foundational movie, I think, for a lot of black cinema. Definitely worth checking out. And then if I go back to Night of the Living Dead, I would say that Night of the Living Dead's successor, like, as far as we know, Night of the Living Dead has sort of created the zombie genre as we know it. And its successor is, I would say, The Girl with All the Gifts. There have been a lot of other zombie movies that try to capture what Night of the Living Dead did and don't very well. But I say Girl with All the Gifts is the movie that kind of captures not only having a story become more important because of its black lead as opposed to having a non-black lead, but also this movie is trying to push the zombie genre into another, into its next phase, trying to progress it into something more. And I love the way that it's trying to do that without giving it away. Such a good movie, and I feel like this, of all the movies on my list, this is probably one of the most underrated, because I feel like every time I bring it up, there's someone that's like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to watch that movie, but I haven't. And
I'm angry because it's a zombie movie, and I should have already watched this.
It's so good. It literally is, like, you watch this movie, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's how we should be doing zombies. We should be, or at least, even if you don't think that, it at least will make you think, or make you look at zombies from a different perspective. Like, what if zombies were actually, you know, this instead of what we thought they were all along? So watch it. I would love to get your opinion of that movie when you watch it. It also has really great acting, like Glenn Close is in it, of all people. So great cast. Another movie that I've talked about on this show before, I think I did like a whole half episode on this.
You did, yeah.
His House, which is on Netflix. If you have not seen His House, please watch it. Not only is it scary, like it legit has some scary stuff going on in it, it also presents a horror movie that's just steeped in not just black culture, but African culture. Like all of the scares in it are inspired by things that harken back to African culture. And it also, part of the scariness of it is, you know, what's coming from that culture, but part of the scariness is also what's happening in this new world as these refugees flee from Africa to Europe. So it deals with that kind of social commentary as well. And I think it handles and balances all of that so well. with great performances like Wunmi Masaku, who was in Loki and was in Lovecraft Country. She's such a great actress, and she plays the wife in that, and she's so on point in it. I just want to mention another movie that I was going to put on my list but didn't. It's another Black ghost story, is Beloved, which was with Oprah Winfrey and Danny Glover and Thandie Newton, and kind of deals with a woman who a woman who has had a child. The ghost of that child is now haunting the house after it has died, and it goes into that, but from the point of view of Black people who are trying to make it just at the turn of like slavery being cut off of emancipation. So it's a little heavier of a movie.
This is Atlanta, right?
No, that was Beloved. I don't have a poster for that.
Oh, sorry.
But I just wanted to mention, like, that's another Black ghost story that I absolutely love, but is a kind of a harder watch than some of these other ones. But the last ghost story that I have on the list is Atlantics. What? There it is. Also on Netflix. I was surprised putting these movies together, how many of them are actually on Netflix.
Which is good, because we normally recommend movies that people can't watch anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, if you can't find it anywhere, rent these movies. These movies are worth renting. But this is one you can just pull up on your Netflix and watch. Another African movie that that is actually it's set on the Ivory Coast, I believe, if I remember correctly. But anyway, it's all about this girl who is betrothed. She's about to marry someone, but she loves someone else, and her something happens to the guy she actually loves, and it's, you know, about their relationship after he maybe has died. I won't go into more details, but it's definitely worth the watch, and it also has one of the best gangs that I have ever seen in a movie. It's a gang of girls, and they just, the look of them when they're approaching, I'm just like, oh yes, wreck shit. I want you to wreck all the shit because you're so awesome. And justified in all the wrecking of the shit. It's such a good movie. I recently watched it because Dave hadn't seen it. We watched it. That's another thing that's been happening over Black History Month. I've just been watching tons and tons of Black movies and then showing Dave tons of Black movies that he hasn't seen. So we watched this, and it was just like my second time watching it. I loved it just as much as the first time, and I kind of want to see it again. So it's that good. Another movie that is not on the list, you don't have a poster for it. Night of the Kings, which is another African movie that really...
By the way, I just realized I could have been following along with your list on Letterboxd instead of searching every movie. So.
It's a private list.
No, I'm looking at it right now.
My Black movie list? I didn't make it private.
It says there's a Black History Month.
Yep, it's not private. I thought I had made it private. Nope. But anyway, it's not. Also, but the other movies, if you do this, then you can see the ones that don't have posters listed in the notes.
Oh.
So when I talk about those, then you don't have to look for posters. Okay. Night of the Kings is a movie about storytelling in Black culture. And how important storytelling is, and it takes place in a prison where this one guy is chosen, he's new to the prison, and he's chosen to be the storyteller for the night, and he has to tell, he has to tell a story from sundown to sunup the entire night, and if he doesn't, then there will be repercussions. Oh. But it's such a good movie that encapsulates like the importance of storytelling, because a lot of like non-white, non-European cultures rely heavily on storytelling from person to person as opposed to having like textbooks. A lot of like older cultures rely heavily on that kind of storytelling, and so it kind of weaves into like how important all of that is. Really good movie. So the last of this little segment of black horror movies. You really can't talk about black horror at this point without talking about Get Out. Or Jordan Peele. Like Jordan Peele's work has been so important, even when like Us wasn't the most perfect movie, because I definitely have faults with Us. It's still really important in what it's doing. I'm really excited for Nope after we have seen that trailer and what that's going to be. But Get Out is like a... Get Out really felt like the first movie on such a big stage, like set out to mainstream audiences. Around the same time as Black Panther, I feel like they kind of hit at the same time. And they both really felt like the first time that black movies that were made specifically for black audiences could be enjoyed by anyone. But being black watching those movies, you really get what it's about on a deeper level, I think. And it was the first time that those kind of movies were so like big budget, so out there, so easily accessible in the mainstream, I guess is the right way to say it. Because there have always been black movies, but a lot of them are not as accessible. Like now that things are streaming so much, they're becoming more accessible. But think about like before streaming, when you could only see movies if you went to the theater, and then the theater would only show a certain selection of movies, and then would only show certain movies like for a limited time. Like there are a lot of movies that I think a lot of people haven't seen because they just didn't have access to them. But I think Get Out and Black Panther really changed that in a big way.
And I think what's successful about this movie, one, it sort of like began to reinvent what the horror genre and what stories you can kind of tell.
Yeah.
And also, it was written for the black community in a way that they'd understand, the way they can bond with it or understand it. But I think it had a little bit of like also teaching moments for everybody else. We're like, oh, that's how that happens. Oh, that's what that feels like. Or that's what the experience that they have. So it kind of served this whole wide, almost universal point of view that people could learn from it. You could connect with it, and it's I think what made it pretty successful.
Yeah, I think like 2020. I want to say like 2016 through 2019. There were like a whole handful of movies like that came out where it was just like, or specifically of black movies, because I think we're still getting there with other cultures. I think that like Latin movies are finally getting there where we're getting like big movies like that. I do want to say what's also interesting about black movies specifically is that like when we think of like Latin movies, there's a whole like South American cinema, there's Spanish cinema, there's Latin cinema, there is like Asian cinema has its own thing. But when we think about black movies, just now is any sort of African cinema starting to pick up, which is why I think it's important to include African movies in this list, like some of the ones I did. But a lot of black cinema is Black American cinema. And so we don't have that whole cinematic industry from another country to refer back to.
I just think of the same thing, yeah, because I was thinking it's like if Mexican people fear they might be represented enough, we'll just go watch Univision.
Yeah.
And go watch some Spanish stuff, and we're fine for a little bit. But like, you can't just turn on the TV and go look up, what an African American thinks.
Right.
There's not, yeah. So.
Right. We had BET for the longest time, and that was it. And that was
UPN for a little bit.
UPN for a little bit. God, what happened to UPN? Yeah. Now I love that we are getting more cinema directly from Africa that, you know, is showcasing Black culture and Blackness. But that's why, you know, that's why I say, like, it's important for these movies to become more accessible and to become more mainstream, because that gives more venues for Black stories to be told, for Black filmmakers to make movies. And I do think, you know, obviously the 90s were a good time for Black cinema in America, because there are lots of good 90s movies that are coming up on this list. But I do think that exactly what you said, stuff like Get Out, Black Panther, Moonlight happened in that time, Hidden Figures, which I still am like jaw-dropping at the idea that Hidden Figures, when it was in theaters, was higher on the box office than a Star Wars movie. Like, that to me is like, what the fuck? Like, that's how you know that these kind of stories can make money, and how studios know that these kind of stories need to be made. Because studios don't actually care about what stories are being made, they just care about the numbers. So that's why I say that these movies, like, even though Black stuff had obviously been done before, these movies are kind of like pushing the Black story in the industry, like, to a new level.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, Moonlight, I literally is the next movie on my list. And I don't even know what else I need to say about Moonlight, because if you have not seen Moonlight is another one of those movies where I'm just like, I bring it up all the time and people say, oh, I haven't watched it yet because I know it's gonna make me cry.
Not me, I saw it right away.
I've heard that so many times. Like, I haven't watched it yet because I know it's gonna make me cry, and I'm just like, well, at this point, I don't know what else to tell you. Like,
and I don't think it's a movie that is just gonna make you bawl. It's just more like, it's a lot of feelings, but it's not meant to. It's not like a Pixar movie where they're like, you're here to cry.
Right.
We're gonna no. I don't think it's that kind of movie where you're like, it's different.
It definitely hits home, and it definitely, like, will make you feel something.
Yeah.
But at this point, anyone who says that to me, I'm kind of like, well, like, what movies do you watch?
Yeah, and what's the problem with crying?
What's the problem with crying?
It's okay to cry a little bit.
Sometimes we need to cry.
Yeah, it feels good afterwards.
Moonlight is a fucking masterpiece. I don't mean it lightly when I say that Moonlight is my favorite movie of all time. I may be a little biased in that because this is the most I've ever actually seen myself on the big screen. And that's someone who is not only Black and queer, but also introverted. I do a lot of talking on this show, but in real life, I don't talk this much. Art knows.
I've known Will for like 18 years. Fuck, a long time.
It's been a long time.
And like, I really only talk to him when we're working. We don't really socialize outside of like...
Every now and then,
we do.
Like before the pandemic, we used to go to like movies on the beach. We would do a little bit of socializing.
Hey, well, you want to have dinner? You want to hang out?
But yeah, no. I'm one of those people that is like, I really want to be invited, but I don't want to come. I'm not coming. But please invite me because I want to feel like I've been invited.
Yes.
But I'm not coming. So yeah, it's Moonlight is the first time that I've seen myself fully represented on screen like that, and I think that it is the utmost importance that everyone at some point in their life have a movie that they see themselves in. And I know a lot of people of color can't say that. Like, we obviously we see ourselves in Black films, we can see ourselves in white characters even, but being able to see like a character that almost fully represents you is really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or do you have a movie like that? I'm curious.
I don't think that I do. If I do, it's not something that because I would know, obviously.
Yeah,
no, I don't think I do.
I was talking about this movie on a panel and how much it represents me like that, and a friend of mine who was in the audience said that she was surprised that she could not think of a movie that she could identify with on that level.
No, I think I've identified with bits and pieces of a lot of movies. and those are the movies that I hold on to.
And that's important too. Like you don't always have to see
too.
your whole self in one character.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like when that moment hits, when that moment hits, like I was in a theater watching Moonlight, and I just was like struck quiet. Like I couldn't, even after the movie was over. Usually Dave and I would just like talk about how great a movie is and how important it is. And after Moonlight was over, I was just quiet. Like I couldn't even find the words to form like how I felt about it because it hit me that deeply. So yeah, it's a life changer to actually see yourself on the screen like that. Like it's weird.
And this movie, outside of the representation and the emotional stuff, is just a great movie. Both like technically and storytelling and everything. It kind of took everything that it was gonna talk about and everything else, and it made really no mistakes that I can think of.
No mistakes.
You can nitpick maybe, but like I couldn't say that I'm like, oh well, I didn't like this part. I like the entirety from beginning to end.
You know what the biggest problem that I've heard people have had with this movie is, and this is nitpick. The biggest problem that I've heard from multiple people in multiple conversations was that they were taken out of the movie when the third act starts because Trevante Rhodes didn't look like the previous actor. That's a nitpick. Yeah. Like if that's their biggest problem with the movie, because even if you're taking out the movie for a second, because it is true when Trevante Rhodes shows up in the movie, he's hot. And you think about that for a moment. You step out of the movie, you're like, oh, look at this guy. And it does kind of come out of nowhere. There is a story element as to why, because that character has been in jail, and when you're in jail, you work out, and that's what...
He changed a lot.
He changed. He specifically pushed himself to change, and then that change totally falls apart when the movie continues, which I think is such a great moment. But if that's your biggest problem with the movie, honestly, that's a nitpick. It's a damn near perfect movie.
You didn't pay attention to the rest of it.
What is this person doing?
This person just really wants us to click on that.
Don't click anything in the chat. Paris is Burning. You know, I'm getting back into my whole month. Kind of like was a wave of like consciousness, like a thread of consciousness. So a lot of these movies segue into the next movie, and so Moonlight was, you know, the utmost of queer Black cinema. It's just perfect. But going back into the history of queer Black cinema again, Paris is Burning is foundational. Like, if you want to understand the queer Black scene, the ballroom scene, where so much of the language and the dialogue and the purpose of the ballroom scene comes from, voguing, any of that, this is the history of that. These are this is the movement that was started, you know, this movie came out in the 90s, but this movement was started like late 70s, early 80s, when really trans Black women and trans brown women didn't have a community of their own. Trans and queer Black and brown people would come together to have these balls and start making their own community, making their own houses, making their own families that supported each other when, you know, their real families threw them away. Paris is Burning is the history of all of that. It is so important for understanding queer culture today. Like, so much of what we consider to be drag race culture, RuPaul's Drag Race, drag queen culture has come out of the ballroom scene. If you haven't seen Paris is Burning at this point, I highly recommend. You've seen this, right? Because we used to watch this in the green room all the time.
Then I saw something.
You know of it.
Yeah.
You've seen parts of it, I'm sure.
I was probably in the corner playing Skyrim.
Like, if you want to know what reading and shade is, like actual definitions of reading and shade, this movie has that for you.
Well, I learned it because there was a lot happening in that break room.
Right.
I didn't need a movie to explain it to me. I witnessed it.
So yeah, Paris is Burning, and then a more recent movie that is all about about Black trans women and the things that they experience is Tangerine. Sean Baker, the director, is on such a roll right now. I've seen 4 of his movies now, and all 4 of them are amazing. So this is the same director that did The Florida Project and Red Rocket that came out last year. That was amazing. Dave and I recently watched a movie titled Starlet, which was also really good, one of his earlier movies. But Tangerine is like its own... It's a good Sean Baker movie, but it's also its own good... It's like one of those movies where everything just mixed perfectly to make what this movie is. Because he's also experimenting with shooting on iPhone with this movie, and so it's a really low budget movie, but that all of that kind of like adds to the atmosphere that what these women are going through. It also presents the occupation of sex work in a positive light, where you get to know these workers and not just like feel like they are degenerates, which a lot of people treat them as. I just feel like Tangerine hit the nail in a lot of good ways.
I not only watched this movie, but I really loved it. And I watched it because I was like, oh, somebody made a movie with an iPhone. And that's the only reason I watched it. But then I watched it and I learned, like, it was such a good movie. And up to that point, I didn't really know much about trans people. I know they existed and I was fine. Like, there they are. But that's about it. That's all I knew.
Yeah.
So having kind of a little bit of insight of trans people's lives, and some of them being sex workers and the kind of thing they get thrown into, was kind of really cool. From the filmmaking point of view, it was such a like cool experiment to say, I'm gonna make a movie, like a full movie, on iPhone. I think the major reason why they did it, one of the major reasons they did it, is they had a budget, and he wanted to pay the actors.
Yeah.
Because it could have been really easy to say, look, I have the money for this movie, can we just do it? It happens a lot of time, and it's part of filmmaking. You ask all your friends to help you make a movie because you don't have any money. And that's normal. But in this chance, he had the amount of money, he wanted to pay the actors. So he paid everybody, basically got paid to be in this movie. And in exchange, he had to basically use whatever little bit of bring the cost of filmmaking down.
Yeah.
Which is kind of very interesting.
I thought our feed had gone out for a while, but it seems like it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know what was happening on my computer. But yeah, what's another thing that I really love about Sean Baker movies is that he uses a lot of unknown actors, and not only unknown actors, but like real people that he meets, and he just puts them in a movie, like non-actors altogether. And so that in itself, actually using or actually hiring and then making sure they got paid these trans women who are like actually a part of the scene, and putting them in the movie just brings that authenticity to it. And it has become so important for many reasons, all of the stuff we've just talked about. My next movie is a movie that came out 2020. Actually, I think I watched it at the end of 2019. Was it a 2020 movie? Oh yeah, I did watch it at the end of 2020 because it's 2022 now. I've lost all track of time.
Yeah,
like I totally have lost a year. Yeah. Lovers Rock, which is actually a part of a larger series. It was a series called Small Axe that's done by director Steve McQueen. Not the same Steve McQueen that was in Bullet.
The other
There's another Steve McQueen who's a black director. Same director as 12 Years a Slave, which I think is a good movie, but like I was saying, not focusing on black trauma in this, like just more black celebration. Steve McQueen did this series called this series called Small Axe, which was a series of movies that all dealt with black people in Europe during this certain time. So one of them was, let me just mention the whole series, because I think the whole series is important to mention. Let me pull up the titles of them. So the Small Axe series is an anthology of movies that include Mangrove, which was about a historic court case in Europe where there was like this riot that kind of happened, and a bunch of black people were caught and sequestered and then put on trial for this, even though it wasn't really their fault. It was a whole race play thing. So that's one of the movies in it. Red, White, and Blue, which stars John Boyega as the first black police officer in the London Metropolitan Police. His story, it's a really good movie. Alex Wheatle is another movie in this series, which is about a black novelist who was sentenced to a term of imprisonment. Education, which is about how black students are treated in the education system in Europe. And then this movie, which is on my list, Lovers Rock, which is kind of like a one night. The whole movie takes place over one night, and it's just these black youths having a house party, and they go to this house party, and it's just what ensues at the house party. So there's like people falling in love. There's lots of preparation beforehand with like, we're gonna have food at this party, who's gonna play the music, who's gonna be the DJ, all of that. And then once the party ensues, there's a, what really makes this movie stand out to me is the way that Steve McQueen encapsulates the joy of being at a house party like this. Mm-hmm. Just like, when you're young and you're like, you're escaping out the house, even if your parents don't want you, go to the party and you're with all your friends and you're in this state of like euphoria because everything is so heightened and you're so happy and you're enjoying your time. The music is like your favorite song and you're out on the dance floor and you just start to feel the music. Mm-hmm. Like that feeling of being in that situation is how this movie feels. Like watching this movie, you get the euphoria of being young and in love and falling, into this like perfect setting where you're just having such a good time. Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of that gets lost as you get older and you kind of like reminisce about those days, but this movie perfectly encapsulates that. Steve McQueen does this really cool thing where a song starts playing and the entire group that's on the dance floor is dancing and singing along to it. And then he pulls the music out, so all you hear are the black people dancing and singing along to it. And everyone is just together and so in unison and so on point, and it's like you become one on the dance floor. And it's just such beautiful filmmaking. The whole Small Axe series needs to be watched, but this one, Lovers Rock, is the one that really stood out to me as being kind of amazing. There's a whole lot of, like I said, there's a romance happening in this movie, and there's a whole lot of like black rom-coms and black romantic movies that I did not include on my list, but I feel like just to name some of them because I think they are important. I'm not a huge rom-com fan, but there are still good movies. So there's movies like Love and Basketball, Jason's Lyric, Love Jones, Poetic Justice. These are all like black love movies. How Stella Got Her Groove Back, which is Angela Bassett, and she's just amazing in everything. So I just wanted to like say those are included as black film too, even though they aren't ones that I specifically navigate to myself. We only have 5 minutes left, and I'm like halfway through this list.
You were like more than halfway through.
I'm more than halfway.
You're like the last 8 or 9.
Okay, I'm gonna try to get through it.
Yeah, your last 10. Oh, we're 2/3 of the way.
2/3 of the way. Since this is the last episode that we're gonna have in a little while, I'm gonna just try to get through it so that
That's okay.
So I can name all of them. The next one is another big one for me, Fences, which is the directorial debut of Denzel Washington, who's amazing in it as an actor and a director. But really, the fact that this is a August Wilson play is what's a big draw for me, because the writing is like just top notch. Did you ever see this one? The writing is so good, the acting is so good, and it's really a place to see Viola Davis shine. She is one of my favorite actresses. I just think that she is amazing anytime she's in front of the camera. And this is one of those movies where it's like you think you're following a certain character, and Viola Davis is kind of just always in the background until, you know, the movie continues and goes on, and she starts to take up more of the lead, and it's just like, yeah, this has been her movie all along. She's foundational. She's the person who like is keeping this entire family together. And she just acts her ass off in it. This is an actor's movie.
Yeah, and the dialogue in this movie is just, it's like not a word is wasted. Everything is direct, and you, it was like because it was a play, so obviously they had time to workshop this dialogue and play with it, and it grew. So it's not just they didn't write a script for a movie. These words and this idea has been living for a long time on its own. So when it finally came to the movie, everything was just like clean and perfect.
And you know, it being a play first, Denzel Washington and Viola Davis had done this play together before, so they already had that chemistry as well. And when you watch them together in this movie, it's just like it pops. Like they really feel like they're doing all of this together. Even though he doesn't pay attention to her, like as if she's. It's part of the movie. It's really good. But there's a whole like series of Black film that are about family and how important family is. A couple of others that I just want to mention are Soul Food and Kingdom Come. Kingdom Come is more of a comedy, but it has so many Black stars, and it's all about, both of those movies are about families coming together for a big meal, a big holiday maybe, and just Black family being Black family, which is its own thing, trust me. We were talking about Steven Spielberg earlier, and he's on this list, The Color Purple. One of the few movies he's directed with a female lead, but also I know that when he was directing this movie, he felt like he wasn't the right person for it, because he's not Black, and maybe this should be told from a Black perspective. But again, this is like I was saying with Get Out and Moonlight and all those movies, when we get these stories to hit big screens and mainstream audiences, it's important. And I think that Steven Spielberg did a great job of interpreting this movie into what it is.
And it clearly went out and said, help me, show me what I need to do so we can get there. He can take his filmmaking skills and then kind of tell the story. Yeah.
This movie was a big part in kind of solidifying some Black talent to come out of it. So like Whoopi Goldberg, Oprah Winfrey, all people who were doing things before this movie, but this movie is the one that really pushed them to a new level, because this was also a big Oscar-nominated movie. Notorious for being one of the most nominated movies without any win. It didn't win any of its awards, any of its nominations. It should have won all of them, personally saying. Danny Glover's also in this movie. Ray Dawn Chong is in this movie. Lawrence Fishburne is in this movie. This just the whole cast. Everyone is so good in this movie. Definitely want to watch. It's a classic. Similarly, another movie that I kind of feel like would make a good double feature with this is Daughters of the Dust, which probably is not as well known because it wasn't, Steven Spielberg. This really marks the difference of where certain filmmakers have access and some others don't. So this was a more independent movie directed by Julie Dash, who is a Black woman director. But this was the first movie directed by a Black woman to get a general release ever. And this came out in 1991. Imagine the whole history of film, the whole history of the industry, and a black woman director doesn't get a general release until the early 90s.
Wow.
But this is a very important movie that feels almost like more of an art piece. It follows a family of Gullah women who are living off of the coast of South Carolina and Georgia. There's a whole like other culture that happened there at the turn of the century that's kind of been lost a little bit since then. But this takes place just as members of this family are looking to leave the island and move into modern times. And so we get a lot of cross between traditional black culture and modern religion and culture, and how they work together, how they clash. We also get like real authentic black women stories, what black women were thinking about at the time and how they were relating through life in such a culture. So it's really important in a lot of the ways of keeping tradition and keeping true to where you come from. I want to also mention another movie that I don't have a poster for, but another movie that is important as far as black women directors. There's a movie called The Watermelon Woman, which is the first movie to be directed by a black lesbian. So that's important for like queer black cinema. Definitely also worth watching. The next movie on my list is titled Pariah. It is...
Sorry, real quick. I was looking for the what won against The Color Purple.
Oh yeah, what is it?
Something called Out of Africa?
Oh, I remember Out of Africa.
I'm looking kind of through the winners and stuff. A lot of the stuff that don't think it didn't stay in the
in memory.
Memory, no. I don't know what Out of Africa is. And I'm
The Color Purple is just that good of a movie that even though it didn't win awards, it's the one people know.
People know, yeah.
I remember Out of Africa, but I don't think it was as good as Color Purple, obviously. No. That's a personal opinion.
I mean, the director of directing Out of Africa also won. But there's cinematography as well. Jesus. Art direction? Jesus, that movie took it.
So let me just say that the politics of who wins at the Oscars is nothing new.
Even
it's
in
always been. It's always been there. And if we're talking about winning at the Oscars, definitely a movie that, I'm going to get back to Pariah in a moment, but definitely a movie that I would not include on my list of black movies, but I do want to give a shout out to Hattie McDaniel, who was the first black woman to win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress in Gone with the Wind, of all movies. Like I said, I would never include Gone with the Wind on the list of best black movies because there are so many problems with that movie. But Hattie McDaniel winning the Oscar for that movie, in my opinion, is incredible. I think that she's a great actress. And also to point out, like, how fucked up the Oscars are, even though she was nominated for an Oscar for Gone with the Wind in 1930. What year did Gone with the Wind come out? It wasn't 1930. 1939. She was nominated for an Oscar for that year, but she was not allowed to attend the ceremony because she was black. And Clark Gable and others from the movie, other cast members from the movie, who wanted to support Hattie McDaniel, boycotted the movie until she was allowed to go. boycotted the event until she was allowed to go. So I believe that she actually did get to go accept her award because she did win. She did win, but yeah, she was not originally even going to be allowed to attend. So yeah, fucked up Oscars is nothing new, y'all. It's been around forever.
So I looked up Out of Africa. I was like, well, maybe another movie about black people.
No, it's not.
No, it's about a Danish author who moves to Africa.
Yeah, so it's set in Africa, but not about black people at all. You know, kind of like Disney's Tarzan.
Yeah.
So, or Tarzan in general, not just Disney's Tarzan, but particularly Disney's Tarzan. So yeah, that's how the Oscars do, y'all. Back to the lists. Pariah is a movie that I actually did not see when it originally came out. It was another one of those movies that kind of went under the radar for a lot of people. And it wasn't actually until Moonlight came out, and I was, always posting about how much I love Moonlight. And someone commented on one of my posts saying that they didn't like, I believe it was a non-black person. Maybe that's not important to you, but it was important to me. Mentioned that they did not like Moonlight and that I should watch Pariah instead because they liked Pariah. So that's how I went into watching Pariah. Pariah is a great movie directed by Dee Reese, who is a director that I love dearly. I've seen, of everything that I've seen directed by Dee Reese, it's all been good. She directed Mudbound, which was a Netflix movie, which was really good. She directed a movie following Count Basie, the singer, starring Queen Latifah. She's done a few other things, but those are the ones that come to mind. But she's another upcoming black woman director who I think should be watched because everything she does is good. So going into Pariah, I was, went in thinking, what will make this better than Moonlight? Of course, being biased that I love Moonlight, but to me, after watching the movie, it really felt like something that didn't need to be in competition. Like Moonlight and Pariah both have queer black leads. One's a gay man and one's a lesbian woman. And they don't need to compete with each other. They're both amazing movies and they actually complement each other. I think one is also very much introverted while the other is looking for acceptance from others. And those are both two very important stories to tell as well. And I think that I love talking about these movies together because they show that being black isn't a monolith. There isn't one way to be black. And we don't have to really compare black movies and say one is better than the other. We can just have a multitude of black movies that are amazing, which is why I do lists like this.
It should be, if you like this movie, you might also like this one.
Right. So yeah, Pariah is an amazing movie, and I'm glad that someone brought it to my attention. I'm sure I would have ended up finding about it at some point anyway, because it's been on a lot of best of lists, deservedly so. But I'm glad that it was brought to my attention so I could watch it, even if I don't like the way that it was brought to my attention, if that makes sense. Good movie, Pariah, and it is, I believe it is streaming. Yeah, it's on HBO Max. So definitely check that out. Also, the lead actress in Pariah is worth noting. Her name is Edipero Oduyi. And I think that a lot of you have now seen her as the sister of Falcon.
Well, Falcon,
and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So she's Anthony Mackie's sister in the MCU. She's the lead of the movie Pariah. She's really good. If you want to see her act, definitely check out Pariah. She was good in the MCU, but
Yeah,
you know,
she didn't have a lot to do.
MCU is MCU.
Good paycheck though.
It is a good paycheck. Well, we love that.
Yeah.
We love that
Don't
for
make
Black
your
people. Next on my list is Boys in the Hood. Another like seminal Black film that really just came out in '91, beginning of the '90s, and it really, like I was saying, the '90s were a good time for Black people in cinema. There were lots of good movies that happened in the '90s, and I think that a lot of it was because of how successful Boys in the Hood was. I remember when this came out, and it was just like everywhere. And it really did kind of change the industry for a little while to show like we can tell these stories, and we can tell these stories authentically. It's not just looking at like drug dealers and what's happening in the hood, but also looking at it in an in-depth perspective where you actually get to know these characters and understand why they do what they do and what the troubles in the community are and what's happening, what motivates them. And then this was also the movie that kind of not just solidified Black content for the 90s, but also the next generation of Black talent, both in front of and behind the camera. Like we talked about earlier, Spike Lee was the only Spike Lee for a long time. But then here comes this movie with director John Singleton, and he became like another Black director name that people could attach themselves to. And he was doing movies that were a little different than Spike Lee, so it was nice that we started to have that, you know, range.
It wasn't like here's another Spike Lee. No,
Right.
It's just another Black director who does other stuff.
Right. So he ends up doing movies like, he did Fast and Furious movies. He did Poetic Justice, which is a movie that I mentioned earlier. I mean, if you've never seen Poetic Justice, it's worth seeing alone just because you get Tupac Shakur and Janet Jackson falling in love. Like, just those two talents right there together is good chemistry. John Singleton also directed Higher Learning, which is a movie that I mentioned earlier in regards to being inspired kind of by school days. He did Baby Boy, which kind of solidified Tyrese Gibson as an actor, and also Taraji P. Henson came out of that movie. So that's who's behind the camera on Boys in the Hood. He
also directed Remember the Time by Michael Jackson's music video.
Oh, that's right. That was a good music video. Remember the Time was it? That in itself is like a Black moment. I'm not going to go down the heels of Black music videos because that is a whole other conversation.
Do you remember, like, did you do the thing where you would sit down and watch? It was usually after The Simpsons. They would premiere the videos, the Michael Jackson videos. My uncle and I would always like watch The Simpsons and sit and watch to see what was the next video. It was great.
And I love that video was not only like a great music video, but it was there were two edits of it, and there was that longer edit that made it more of like a little short film where you got to know like the characters a little bit more. You got to see Eddie Murphy acting a little bit at the beginning. So that's John Singleton. He's amazing. He passed a couple years ago, unfortunately. So we don't have him directing movies anymore, but Boys in the Hood, that's who was behind the camera on Boys in the Hood. In front of the camera, let's talk about who came out of this movie. Ice Cube, I mean, he was already around as a rapper, but he really got started as an actor in this movie. Cuba Gooding Jr. A lot of these people were doing things, but this is the movie that really like made them the name that they are. So Cuba Gooding Jr., Lawrence Fishburne had been on like Pee-wee's Playhouse and done other things, but this is really the one. Nia Long, who's amazing. I love her and everything. Angela Bassett, who I already mentioned, like she's great and everything as well. Morris Chestnut came out of this. Regina King came out of this movie, in addition to like doing shows like 227. Tyra Farrell, who I wish was doing more and had done more, but she was a great actress in this movie. There was just like a whole name of like of people who like Boys in the Hood was just very influential. And the next movie is a direct influence from it. Friday. Which is really like it really is almost like a parody in itself. Friday is probably the big staple from the 90s.
I saw this a lot too.
Yeah, this is one that I think everyone saw a lot.
They didn't make movies for Mexican people, so I had to watch like Black people movies.
Right, and this is like I can totally see the similarities. Like I wouldn't even be surprised. But I
lived in Long Beach, so it was
right.
It was, yeah.
I love that Friday like took everything that was a lot of the elements that were serious about Boys in the Hood. And made it a comedy, but at the same time, it's not like a parody, because there were definitely parody movies too, like Don't Be a Menace in the Hood, while drinking your juice in South Central was the whole title. There were definitely parodies like that, but Friday still respected the story, even though it was funny. Still made the characters believable, even though they were wild and insane. And there's so many references from that movie that have become just like a part of pop culture. I mean, Friday was made as a movie about Black culture, but those references have become pop culture. Like if you ever heard someone say "Bye Felicia," which is, I'm glad that people are over saying that now, but for a long time everyone was saying
just like
Bye
2 years
Felicia.
ago.
Just like 2 years ago. And this movie came out in '95, and Bye Felicia finally hit like white lingo 2 years ago, and they couldn't stop saying it, and it was so annoying. That's how ahead of the time Black people often are. Friday is just so funny, and again, it's Ice Cube, Regina King is in this movie again. I have loved, I'm just going to do a little sidebar. I have loved watching Regina King come into her own. Like from like watching her on 227 as the daughter of the family into being now like a big director of her own, which we're going to get to because there's another movie for her on the list. Friday is just, it's so classic. Also, Chris Tucker is hilarious in this movie. Again, Nia Long is in this movie. She was also in Boys in the Hood. Tom Tiny Lister, who is the bully in this movie, also known for being the president in The Fifth Element. I love him.
And anytime they needed a big guy.
Anytime they needed a big guy, he was the one to cast, and he's great. Faison Love is in this movie, is great. Bernie Mac is in this movie. Megan Good is in this movie. So many good people came out of Friday as well. It's just like another movie that really stands out to me for that time, but probably isn't as well known outside of the Black community. Maybe you know this movie better. But I feel like Friday is a movie that definitely crossed over in ways that a lot of movies didn't. But another movie from around this time that I really love is there's not a poster for it. House Party. Did you ever watch the House Party movies when you were young?
Yeah, I did. I watched those. Yeah.
I feel like they don't get remembered as much, but they were definitely like an important part of my growing up. I love the House Party movies and Kid and Play and all of their music.
No, I remember I thought they were so cool.
Yeah.
I went to get a haircut as a kid and I said, "Can I have a flat top?" And they went, "Sure." And then just cut my hair like normal because I wanted that. I was so excited. I thought it was the coolest thing.
I'm really upset with the end of that story that they just cut your hair as one, because I want to see a picture of little you with a
There was
flat
no
top.
way my hair was gonna do that ever. I had like fluffy curly hair, and it was there was not. They just looked at me and said, "Okay, yeah, sure." And I finished it. I was like, I don't. Did they do it? I was convinced that I was like, Oh, maybe they did. Just my hair was too short, so no, I didn't.
No.
I just asked. But yeah, I love those movies.
It's, yeah, as you can see, black hair tends to stand up. So we can do flat tops very easily. Oh gosh, yeah, I love House Party, and I had a crush on both Kid and Play as a kid. Do you remember when Kid and Play had a Saturday morning cartoon?
Yes, vaguely. I don't remember what.
It was weird.
I remember
it was weird.
Yeah,
but they were doing a lot of. There was also a New Kids on the Block Saturday morning cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
There were a lot of
I
like
loved them too.
weird things like that. I did too. Everyone loved New Kids on the
That
Block.
was my first cassette tape I ever owned. New Kids on the Block.
So now we're into black comedy. You can't talk about black comedy without talking about Eddie Murphy.
Okay, do have a poster.
Dolomite Is My Name is a more recent movie.
2019.
Eddie Murphy has been doing like some great stuff. There are some problematic things in the history of Eddie Murphy's filmography, but then there are some things like Coming to America, Boomerang. I want to mention Boomerang because the cast of women in Boomerang is like some of the best black women to ever hit the screen. You got like Halle Berry, Eartha Kitt, who I am obsessed with, Grace Jones. Boomerang is a good movie to watch. And then also Harlem Nights was really funny. Did you ever watch Harlem Nights? It's like the black take on like old mob movies, but they're like just shooting each other and like cursing each other, and it's a bit much, to be honest. I have a feeling that movie has not aged well, but I remember it being really funny, especially when the moment that everyone will remember who's seen that movie is Della Reese getting her toe shot off. It's a moment. But anyway, like the history of Eddie Murphy being one of the top black comic filmmakers is a big deal, but I really feel like I don't want to be I don't want to put down his previous work because I think that his previous work is pretty incredible, but I really feel like Dolomite Is My Name may be the best performance that Eddie Murphy has ever done. Like
Wow.
I don't know what it is. It's just something about this movie that really tapped into everything that it needed to tap into. So it's a biopic, expertly written by the same scriptwriters who wrote the biopic for Ed Wood, which is another like great biopic that I don't think many people were expecting to be great. But it's a biopic about Rudy Ray Moore, who was a blaxploitation filmmaker. And so that's who Eddie Murphy plays in this. He also went by the name Dolomite. One of the characters that he did blaxploitation movies about is named Dolomite. And it's just all about, Rudy Ray Moore putting his name out there, getting his movies made on a basically no budget, and the things that he went through. And it's really funny. It's a hilarious movie, but it also is a really great movie about like behind the scenes in Hollywood. And it's a great industry movie. It's a great like black people can do shit movie. Like it's just like an all around great movie, and I feel like it might be my favorite Eddie Murphy movie.
No,
I think I'm just realizing that right now.
Tom Judd says Boomerang is same director as House Party. Never knew that. Just realized that.
Yeah.
I also did not know that.
I also didn't know that. So thank you. I didn't really look that up beforehand. But yeah, that's a lot of those 90s movies have the same feel because there were a specific set of people that, like I was saying, Boys in the Hood kind of inspired people in front of and behind the camera to be like kind of household names. I guess the people behind the camera weren't household names, but they were people whose work you knew even if you didn't know you knew it. There were a lot of the same people doing, these movies. And the 90s were a good time for all of that stuff. Dolomite Is My Name, like I was saying, is a great biopic But I will say that usually I prefer documentaries over biopics. And I really love the documentary What Happened to Miss Simone, especially in contrast to the biopic on Nina Simone that they did, because that was not it. If you have never seen what it looks like for a black person to be in blackface, Bamboozled, like I was saying earlier, did a good commentary on that. But when they made that biopic version of Nina Simone's story and they cast a lighter-skinned Zoe Saldana to play this really dark-skinned woman and they darkened her up, it was not cute. And thankfully she has, Zoe Saldana has come out as saying like, that was a wrong choice. Because it was.
She's great.
She's great. She's a good actress, but that's, we were talking a couple weeks ago about Thandie Newton apologizing for not representing black women. And it's kind of like, if you're a lighter-skinned black woman, then represent the lighter-skinned women and let dark-skinned black women represent dark-skinned black women. Like I already said, black is not a monolith. Not all black people can represent everything black.
And if you find yourself in a place where you're a lighter black person and you're having to represent a dark black person, maybe don't blackface yourself. Just don't do that.
Yeah. There are plenty of we could talk about colorism because there are plenty of dark-skinned black actresses who don't get work because the go-to is to hire lighter-skinned black actresses. So if you're in a role like that, like even better than not darkening your face, suggest a dark-skinned black actress to play that role. Like you don't have to do it.
You see that a lot in like Latino stuff as well.
Yeah.
That's the lighter-skinned Latino people always do all the work.
Yeah. The proximity to whiteness, and this is a loaded statement because there are a lot of things that lighter-skinned black people go through that have nothing to do with whiteness, for sure. But the proximity to whiteness often gets people more work.
Yes.
Unfortunately. And we all have to be better about not letting that happen anymore. But anyway, so that biopic, do not watch the Nina Simone's biopic, but do watch What Happened to Miss Simone, which is a documentary about her life. And it is very eye-opening. Like, you think of Nina Simone or any like classic black talent whose name we hear all the time when we think like maybe they were treated a little bit better. Nope. The stuff that this woman went through, just because of who she was, the way she was treated was just so unfortunate. But the movie still is a celebration of her and her music, and her activism and everything that she should have been recognized for long ago. This movie is trying to recognize. So definitely worth checking out. Also on Netflix. There's so many movies on Netflix on this list. Another movie that came to mind that is not, I don't have a poster for, but there is a movie called Black Girl that, let me get the year of the movie. It came out in 1966 and is directed by Osmani Sembien. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but he is a French African filmmaker. But this movie is it's a shorter movie. It's only an hour and 5 minutes, and I believe it's part of the Criterion Collection, so you might be able to stream it there. But it's a movie that basically follows this black girl who is getting a job as a in the 60s as a maid, nanny, housekeeper to a white family, and what that does to her and how that makes her feel. And it's, for it to be a movie made in the 60s, kind of unheard of here in the States because, like I said, it is a French film. Mm-hmm. But I think it is highly important to to see what was going on in the minds of Black women back then. And so it kind of, what happened to Miss Simone made me think of that and want to mention that movie as well, because I think it's an incredible movie that a lot of people haven't seen. But off of the heels of Nina Simone and her music and activism, I want to mention the movie Summer of Soul, which is also a documentary that features Nina Simone as well as a plethora of Black talent that were performing in this Harlem Cultural Festival in the 60s, I believe in 69. It was the same year as Woodstock. And we know how memorable and big Woodstock is. Everyone knows what Woodstock is. You say that word, everyone knows what you mean. This Harlem Cultural Festival happened the same year. It was a big, multiple weeks long festival. Every weekend, there would be different Black performers coming to Harlem to perform. And it was recorded and well attended by, all the Black people in New York. But for some reason, the footage of this recording had been lost for so long and everyone has forgotten that this event happened. It's like the polar opposite to Woodstock. This is also at the, towards the, I will say, end of the civil rights movement, because, I don't know, we're still fighting for civil rights in my opinion. But this was right after a year after the assassination of Martin Luther King, which then put certain laws into effect. And so a lot of people see it as the end of the civil rights movement. But Black people were still sort of disenchanted. And this festival helped to bring hope and joy and love back to Black people a little bit. And it's just beyond me that it was not until now in 2021 that this documentary came out. This is currently, this year's Oscars, this movie is nominated for Best Documentary. So it's a brand new film. And it's not until now that people are finding out about this festival that happened in 1969. It was a big deal. And the documentary is amazing, directed by Questlove. So it's got the love for all of the music. He's a musician, so it's got the love for all of the Black foundational music in it, but also shows what was happening in the world historically during this time and why this festival was so important. This documentary is not on Netflix, but it's on Hulu.
Oh, there you go.
Everyone should watch it. I feel like it's so good, and it's the documentary that I hope to win the Oscar. I don't think it will because it's fucking the Oscars, but my wishful thinking. Off of that, because there's so many Black icons in that movie, another recent movie that I want to talk about is One Night in Miami, which is a movie that we kind of just talked about this last week. Takes these 4 Black icons, real life icons, and positions them into a story where they interact and show their Black perspectives and experiences. And again, shows that being Black isn't a monolith. There's so many different ways to be Black, and there's so many different perspectives that Black people have that not necessarily all Black people agree about one thing. This is a incredible movie in the way that it showcases what was going on in Black culture and Black community at that time, with Malcolm X, Jim Brown, Sam Cooke, and Muhammad Ali. And again, I was talking about Regina King really having a come up. This was her directorial debut. So we went all the way from her starring as a kid on 227 to being like an amazing director, an Oscar-winning actress. I love Regina King, and I hope that...
Superhero.
Yes, she is a superhero. She's absolutely a superhero. This would be a whole different list if I had actually included television shows. Watchmen would definitely be on that list. So that would make up the 28 for 28 Days in February, but I was like, I want to round it up, and I also want to talk about more than just how many days there are in a month, because there are far more black movies that I enjoy than that. So the last 2 black movies are like really fun ones. So the first one is Black Panther, which is it's fucking Black Panther. What else do I need to say about it? It was like I already said, a major like turning point, I think, in the industry to have this, along with those other black movies that were coming out around the same time, be so major at the theater. Seeing the black turnout for this movie was wonderful. Like seeing people go to the movies, black people go to the movies, all cosplayed out as comic book characters. Seeing non-colonized Africa, I love. Seeing like Afrofuturism done on this big of a budget was amazing, because there are definitely others that have been done lower budget, not quite as well. And having Marvel like actually know that you need to hire a black director to tell this story. And that turning point, you know, specifically for Marvel movies, because Marvel is almost its own genre at this point. So now we have the first like black directed Marvel movie. We have a black woman director coming up on another Marvel movie, and we've had other non-white, people come in to direct movies. I like seeing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Also, if I have to say Black Panther, I would be blasphemous if I did not mention how amazing Blade was as a superhero movie back in the day. Like, we all loved Blade, and he was giving us black superhero before we even knew what that was in film terms. Like, we knew it in comic terms, but that was far before the superhero genre even popped off. And then I have to mention Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse as the last main movie on this list. How amazing that was for black superheroes, black animation, just black comic book movies, which is its own thing. It's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse really had this like Afro-Latino character who's amazing, and we got to see his world. And then as an offshoot of that, I just have to mention other black animated movies like The Princess and the Frog, Osmosis Jones. Unfortunately, sometimes these black animated movies don't allow us to fully be black the whole time. Movie. But there's still, good things about them. And then Bebe's Kids, which is a movie that is so good. But that's one that I feel like is underrated or not as well known. Another one that came out of the 90s, like black movie push, but fully animated and wild and hilarious. So
I knew the guy who worked on Baby's Kids.
No.
And he, because a lot of the animation was overseas, they did. He tells a story where he literally had to fly overseas. I don't forget what country it was, somewhere in Asia, and he on a plane had the film, the only copy of the film on a plane to fly it over to the U.S. to bring it to America to deliver the final some of the.
That had to be nerve-wracking. Yeah. Like, you don't want anything to happen to that footage. You have the only existing footage of that. Wow. Important. That's a American hero right there.
I will tell him next time.
So yeah, there are lots of black movies to love. And of course, that was a long list of 30 plus movies. We didn't hit all of them. No. Like there are still other black movies that we did not mention. There are tons of black comedies, black horrors, black romance movies that I haven't even touched upon in this conversation. So go watch some if you haven't seen them. And if you have seen them, watch them again, because they're that good.
Cool. So thank you for joining us. This is an extra long episode today.
Yeah.
So like we said before, we are going to be taking a break, and then we'll communicate. If you're on a Discord, if you're not on Discord, go to discord.rollforhotness.com, which is the Discord for all the Perception Studio. There's a Cinephilia channel there. I'll try to update to see what's happening. But we're not going away forever. We're just taking a break and figuring things out, and we might be coming back in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, even though we're taking a break, this new Batman movie is coming out, and I kind of want to talk about it.
So yeah,
we may have like a special here and there to just talk about specific things.
Should we just talk kind of about what ideas we have?
Yeah, let's
so
talk
one of the
about
things
them.
we're gonna probably do is move partially away from the live streams, not because we don't like them, but because we want to try other things. So we might be doing some pre-recorded videos, things like that, and then we'll do live streams when we have something special, like the Batman movie. Like, let's want to do a live stream. I feel like certain things that we do function better maybe as a pre-recorded thing, and some things function real well as a live stream. And hopefully the live streams will have guests and make more roundtables. So we're gonna play around with those ideas and see what other things we can come up with. And that's kind of what the future of Cinephilia is. Possible name change from Cinephilia, so we might come back as something else. We don't know.
Yeah, I think as we move into doing new stuff, we kind of want to like have a whole branding thing. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
We'll let you know.
You will know soon, as soon as we know.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks so much for sharing us. We'll be back at some point, and make sure you guys come check us out tomorrow. What's today? Sunday. Tomorrow for Tabletop for 2, 2:30, 2 o'clock, 2:30. And then Tuesday, Solon's Legacy, brand new 4-episode arc starting this Tuesday night. Back on Wednesday night for Pesach and Check. It's always there. And then I think we're bringing back, took a little break from Monster Care Squad, and they'll be back Thursday night at 7:30. All of those evening shows at 7:30 p.m. But thank you so much. And we will Cinephilia later.